So the first is that you should make a habit immediately of saving 10% of your income. So just automatically 10% of your income should go into a savings account. And this is very much the first step because there's a lot of other stuff that you can do and that you should do eventually, but this is the place to start. And I say that this is the place to start also because you can do this at any level of income. You can live off of 90% of what you're currently making. And that is true even if you are, barely make any income. And I say this out of experience, by the way, because I started doing this and I'm very grateful that I started doing this long before I had like steady income. And so at the time it was, and in the beginning it can be a bit of a discouraging experience where you have like this tiny, measly amount that you're putting aside into your savings account, and your savings account is kind of pathetic looking for quite a long time, right? But just the habit of doing that is something that was massively valuable for me. And I started doing that many, many years ago. And so initially, there's nothing else to do, right? You just have any savings account, and it doesn't matter what kind of a savings account it is. It doesn't have to be an investment account. There's basically the cheapest savings account you can get, right? Don't let them upsell you on some nonsense. It should just be a separate account where you put your money with the idea of, I never want to touch this money. And I just also want to tell a brief story of how this worked out for me. Because like I said, I started doing this when I was working like temp jobs, and I never knew how much income I'd have. And I was always, stretching every penny basically to get by. And I started doing this, and two things happened that make this so worthwhile. The first is that after a few months, so first of all, even if you have very little money, like 90% of that money, you can still get by.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just imagined that you made 10% less and that was your salary, then you'd find a way to get by. So that's how you have to treat it, right? I really don't want to touch that money. And the second, or the first thing that happens then is that even though in the beginning it can be quite discouraging, what happens is that over time, after a few months or after a year or so, you log into your bank, your e-banking thing, and you can see that, okay, here's your current account, which is almost always empty, right? But then there's this other account, and that amount starts looking interesting. And it starts changing your attitude, because even if it takes a long time, at some point you look at that and you go, oh, I could comfortably live an entire month off of just this. And at some point it's like 3 months or 6 months. You're like, oh, hold on. If I lost everything right now, if I got fired, if I lost all of my income sources, I'd be fine for like half a year. And that feels very, very different than looking at your bank account and it's always like you're always on your last $12 somehow,
Yeah. And just hoping that there isn't some catastrophe that occurs, like your car breaks down or something like that.
Exactly.
These things that do happen. So, I mean, this is obviously related to the mental aspect and mental emotional stuff as well. So the peace of mind that can come from that. And this is classic compound interest, isn't it? Because like compound interest, when I often think about that, I think usually that's used in like investing and stuff like that. It's like you can apply the same thing. What I've done, because this I actually started doing this about a couple of months ago, when at the advice of one of the other members of the team, Abby, suggested that you do this exact thing, like 10% of your saving, 10% of what you earn, put it into a savings account. I've actually set up a standing order that just goes from current account to savings account, and I never have to look at it. And I just and yeah, you're exactly right. If someone was like, "Oh, take this much money every week or so," I'd be like, "No, give me that back." But when you just set it up, you just don't think about it. And next thing you know, you've just got this steadily growing amount of money, and it's just, oh, well, that's nice. Every time you look at it, it's just a little bit bigger number. You're like, this is quite nice. And it gives you that sort of peace of mind.
This isn't even compounding yet, though. This is not compound interest, because compound interest is if the earnings grow proportionally to the size of the pot, right? So if you were earning 10% on that money, then every time you get the 10%, it's 10% larger. So the next 10% is larger, and so on and so forth. That's compound interest, and that's the thing that starts very slowly and eventually is insanely lucrative. And that's that, you get into that when you get into investing, essentially.
Right.
But it's good that you mentioned that, because like even without the compounding effect, just the automatic saving already does this, already gives you that peace of mind. And the more automatic it is, the better.
Yeah.
But also actually compound effect, the compound interest is one of the things, it's why you have to get out of debt, because you're paying interest on your debt and that compounds. And this is, you have to understand compound interest. And I should have talked about this before, but hey, amateur podcast. You have to understand compound interest. And the way to understand compound interest is not to use your brain, because your brain cannot understand compounding. Okay? Your brain, your intuition, when you think about it, oh yeah, it gets more. No. No, you have no idea what this means. Your brain can't compute this, all right? The way to understand this is you have to write it down. So compound interest, right? It goes both ways. If you see a TV or a couch or whatever, it's like $1,500, but you can get it on debt. You can get it in rates or whatever. Like your brain can't make sense of that. What you have to do is you have to say, okay, if I get this payment plan, how much will this couch cost? Oh, $2,000. Do I want this couch for $2,000? That's the question. That's only the first question. Because if the answer is yes, then save $2,000, then buy the couch and keep the $500. But the other question is, what happens if I miss some payments, right? That's the other, and you can't just, well, I guess it gets a bit more expensive. No, write it down. Write down, what happens if I miss 6 payments? How much does this couch cost? What if I then can't catch up? How much does this couch cost in 5 years if I can't catch up on these payments, right? And eventually, like, do I want to buy this couch for $25,000? No, probably not.
It's a pretty good couch.
Yeah, it better be, right, at that point. So, yeah, your brain can't understand that. And it's the same with investments, where, people love to draw the graph of ideal investment returns and so on. And yes, indeed, right, you invest a little bit and you get compound interest and eventually you're wildly wealthy. There, I think that, but again, this kind of goes beyond what we're talking about in this episode, because the simple story you're being told is too simple. And the principle that I like to refer to for this is the phrase, I think you'll find it's a bit more complicated than that. Right? So whenever someone tells you about the wonders of investing, and it's like, oh my God, look, if you put in this much money over 40 years and blah, 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 and then you'll have millions of dollars. In your mind, what should flash across your mind is, I think you'll find it's a bit more complicated than that. So, and that's one of the reasons why we're not talking about investing in this episode.
Maybe another episode.
Maybe another episode.
I'd like to pick your brain on quite a lot about that.
All right. So back to 10% savings. Right? Automatic 10% savings. And yeah, like we talked about, it gives you a great sense of security to have that savings build up. And I think it's really good to have a savings that you are not going to touch unless it's a real emergency. And that savings should be at least 6 months to 1 year of your living expenses. That's a really good place to come from. Now, in my case, like I said, I built this habit early on. And I was really glad that I did, because what happened in my case is that I did spend that money at one point. And I spent that money when I was transitioning from one business to another. And so I was getting into software development and trying to figure out how to build a software company. We started hiring people and stuff, and this cost a lot of money. And at that point, I decided that in order to keep this going, so I basically ran out of money. And I decided that it was worth pursuing this. It was worth investing to learn how to build a software company. And I essentially decided the best investment I can make right now, best place to put my money, is into my own company. And that's what I did. And I basically raided most of my savings account in order to keep this software development experiment going, which eventually turned into Thrive Themes, which obviously is a God knows how many thousands-fold return on investment, right? So, and that is an example of a good investment decision made. So it's like, obviously you can try to build a savings account that you just keep building until you retire. And that's well worth doing. In my case, it really enabled me to do this thing that ended up being my most important business that I've built so far. And without starting the habit of putting aside 10%, even if it was a pathetically small amount, I couldn't have done that. And that would have cost me, I don't know, would have cost me a lot. Would have cost me a lot not to be able to do that. So that's also just a personal story of why this is important to me, or why, I've kind of proven how well this can work out, even with very humble beginnings.
Got you. So, and here's a personal story about why finances has always been a topic that I've just never had a good handle on it. And the part of the reason for that is because of my own slightly misguided personal philosophies in the past. Because I was thinking, it was basically driven by, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So why would I save now? I could get hit by a car. I literally told myself that before just spending daft amounts of money on like festival tickets and stuff. I was like, well, I don't know what's going to happen. I wouldn't like to get hit by a car tomorrow and not spent this money. It's like, oh Jesus, it's like that. Even that kind of line of thinking is still not incompatible with just saving 10%.
Exactly.
So, which is why I really like this. It's like, it's just so simple. It's just 10%. You're not breaking the bank. You're not going out ever. It's just, it's just 10%. You won't even notice it's gone.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, because you could have gotten those festival tickets anyway, right? You could have saved that 10% somewhere else and you could still go to the festival, so no problem.
Exactly.